Story 1. The Key Under the Mat. The house had been empty for nearly 30 years. It was the kind of building that made your skin itch just by looking at it. Peeling white paint, boarded-up windows, and a front garden swallowed whole by ivy and nettles. Locals called it the Bracken House. Some said it was haunted. Others just said it was cursed. But for Mark, a freelance urban explorer with a decent TikTok following, it was content gold. He arrived just before sunset, armed with a GoPro, a torch, and a bolt cutter. As he stepped over the crooked gate, he noticed something odd. The front door wasn't locked. In fact, there was a weathered mat in front of it, and beneath it, a single rusted key. Mark grinned. "Too easy," he muttered, filming everything. As he unlocked the door, it creaked open with an unnatural groan, as if the house itself was exhaling after a long sleep. Inside was pitch black. Dust clung to the air like cobwebs, and the temperature dropped instantly. Mark walked through the hallway, torchlight sweeping over cracked wallpaper and broken photo frames. Every room felt untouched, like whoever lived here just vanished mid-conversation. Upstairs, he found a child's room. Pink walls, a tiny bed, toys still neatly arranged on a shelf. But one toy, a porcelain doll with a missing eye, sat dead center on the bed, facing the door. Mark didn't remember seeing it there when he first entered the room. He backed out and turned to head downstairs. But something was different. The hallway was longer, way longer. The staircase was missing. The door he came through? Gone. The house had changed shape. His GoPro began glitching, static breaking through the audio. A voice, raspy young, whispered through. "You took the key." Mark ran, room to room. No exits. Just more corridors, more dolls, more eyes watching. In a final panic, he smashed through a boarded window and hit the ground hard. Limping, gasping, he scrambled to his car and drove off, the house shrinking in his rearview mirror like a bad dream. But every night since, no matter where he is, the doll appears, on his bed, on his dashboard, in the shower. Always watching. And under it, the same rusted key. Story 2. The Dinner Bell. Danny and his sister Rachel were estate agents. They didn't believe in ghosts, curses, or haunted houses. Just property values and commissions. So when they were asked to assess a crumbling Victorian mansion in Dorset that hadn't been touched since the 1970s, they saw a juicy listing, not a death trap. The house sat alone on a hill, windows like empty eyes. The front garden was overgrown, yet oddly symmetrical. Rachel pointed it out, joking it looked like someone had been pruning it from the inside. Inside, the air was stale, like breathing through an old curtain. But the strangest thing was the kitchen. It was pristine. Spotless table. Plates set out. For chairs. A roast chicken still intact on a serving plate. Decades old but not rotten. As if time forgot it. Rachel laughed nervously. What? Were they expecting guests? Then the bell rang. A small brass bell hung from a string in the hallway. No wind. No movement. But it rang again, twice. Long, clear, and shrill. Danny called out, thinking someone was playing a prank. No answer. They checked every room. Nothing. Then the plates on the kitchen table began to rattle. Gently at first, then violently, until they shattered. The bell rang again. On instinct, they ran. But the front door was locked. Windows wouldn't break. Danny looked down and saw footprints forming on the dusty floor. Bare feet. Small. Leading from the dining table toward them. Rachel screamed as a deep voice echoed down the hallway, whispering a single sentence in a tone that made their blood freeze. "Sit. It's rude to leave before dinner." When the police arrived hours later, the house was empty. But the table had 2 new plates, 2 new forks, and on the wall, scratched deep into the plaster, were the words. They didn't like the chicken either. Story 3. The Girl in the Attic. Kieran had just moved to Sheffield for university. Tight budget, new city, so when he found a whole 3-bedroom house being rented dirt cheap, he jumped on it. It was old, creaky, and cold, but it was his. On his second night, he heard thuds above his room. The attic. Figured it was just squirrels. He went up the next morning, tiny ladder, old hatch, and found dust, old boxes, and a small child's rocking chair. And a drawing. It was a child's crayon sketch. A girl with long hair, wide eyes, and a mouth stitched shut. The words "Don't let her out" were scrawled in the corner. Creeped out, Kieran threw it away. But that night, he heard crying. Not from outside. From the attic. Soft, muffled sobs. When he opened the hatch, the chair was rocking. And the drawing was back. Over the next week, things got worse. His phone would vibrate at 3:33 a.m., and every time he checked, there'd be a new picture in his gallery, a drawing of that same girl. The details got clearer, more lifelike, and her eyes, they were beginning to look familiar. One night, he locked the attic shut with a bike chain, bolted it from the outside. But at 3:33 a.m., he woke up to the sound of soft breathing next to his bed. He turned slowly. The girl from the drawing stood there, pale, hair dripping with something dark, her stitched mouth trembling. She held out another drawing. It showed him, lying in bed, eyes open, blood spilling from his mouth. Kieran moved out the next day. But no matter where he goes, the drawings follow. Every flat, every city. Even when he burns them, they return. He's running, but she's patient. Story 4. The locked room at Red Hollow. Lena had been flipping houses for years, but Red Hollow was different. It stood deep in the countryside, a red brick manor choked by vines, with a wraparound porch that groaned in the wind. Locals said a doctor once lived there, did surgeries in the basement, weird ones. She shrugged it off. Superstition didn't pay the bills. Everything went smooth until she found the locked door upstairs. It was thick, reinforced, and the key was nowhere in sight. The previous owner had scribbled something in the blueprints. Room 6 never open. Naturally, Lena called a locksmith. The moment the lock clicked open, an ice-cold gust knocked both of them back. The air stank of iron. Inside was just a bed, chains on the wall, scratches etched into the floorboards, and a name carved deep into the headboard, Sarah. The locksmith refused to come back. That night, Lena heard dragging sounds above her. Heavy, slow. She grabbed her flashlight and crept upstairs, heart pounding. The door to room 6 was open, despite her locking it earlier. Inside, the chains were swinging. The next morning, she noticed bruises on her wrists. Circular, like fingers. She boarded up room 6, moved all her things downstairs, and tried to forget it. But every night, the dragging returned. Her dog wouldn't go near the stairs. And then one night, at 3:09 a.m., her bedroom door creaked open, and a raspy voice whispered, "I don't want to be in that room anymore." Story 5. The Family Portrait. In a quiet neighborhood in Yorkshire, a modest 2-bedroom semi-detached house was put up for sale. It had been owned by the Aldrich family before the father murdered everyone and vanished. That was 1978. No one touched it since. That is, until Dave, 23, curious and reckless, snuck in one night with his mates, recording for a haunted house challenge video. They laughed through most of it. Dusty furniture, squeaky floors, the usual. But in the living room was a giant portrait above the fireplace, a family of 4. Parents, 2 kids, all smiling. The weird thing, their eyes were unnaturally dark, almost black. As they joked about it, Dave noticed something off. Did the dad just blink? They laughed, nervously. Suddenly, one of the lads, Jamie, screamed and pointed. The kid in the painting had turned its head slightly. Panic set in. Dave turned off the camera and told everyone to leave. But as they opened the front door, they froze. The hallway was longer, endless, like a tunnel. Behind them, the living room lights snapped on. In the reflection of the TV screen, they saw it, the father from the painting, standing behind them, still in that same suit, same crooked smile. Dave ran into the kitchen, slammed the door shut. Silence. Then a whisper through the wall. "You should have smiled for the picture." When police found the house the next morning, the door was wide open. No sign of Dave or his friends. Just the painting. And now, it has 7 people in it. Story 6. The Clock That Shouldn't Tick. When Nora inherited her grandmother's derelict farmhouse in Wales, she planned to sell it immediately. No nostalgia. No drama. She barely remembered the woman. The house was decaying. Holes in the roof, rotten floorboards. But the grandfather clock in the hall was spotless. Ticking, even though it hadn't been wound in decades. Nora asked around. No one in the village would even speak about the house. Just told her not to stay after midnight. She ignored them. At 11:59 p.m. on her first night, the clock began chiming. Slowly, painfully. Then it struck 13. Nora stared at it in disbelief. A new hour. Suddenly, the temperature dropped. Frost crept up the windows. The ticking grew louder, faster. She stumbled back and saw, inside the glass of the clock, a reflection that wasn't hers. A woman stood behind her. Thin, hair like soaked straw, eyes empty. Nora turned quickly, but the hall was empty. She smashed the clock. Silence. But then every clock in the house, mantelpieces, wall clocks, even a broken wristwatch in a drawer, started ticking in sync. From the attic came a voice, hoarse and furious. "You broke my time." The next morning, the villagers saw her leave the house barefoot, hair gray, face blank. She never spoke again. But they say the clock, though shattered, still ticks. Story 7. The Basement Cinema. There was a derelict house outside of Sheffield, known by locals as the Cinema House. Nobody lived there for over 30 years. But every Friday night, a soft glow could be seen coming from the basement window, like an old film projector flickering away. One night, Callum and his girlfriend Amy broke in for a thrill. The inside was gutted, graffiti on the walls, broken furniture, damp air. But the basement door, untouched, spotless, and unlocked. They went down. The staircase opened into a dusty home cinema. Red velvet seats, tattered screen, and a projector already running. It clicked and hummed with no power source, showing black and white footage. A family at dinner. Then, the father dragging a woman by the hair, screaming. Then, a boy watching, face blank, mouthing something silently. Amy leaned in. "What's he saying?" Callum whispered. "He's saying, 'Don't watch.'" Suddenly, the door behind them slammed shut. The film burned up mid-frame. Darkness. Then a new projection started on its own. This time, it was live footage. Of them. Sitting there. Watching themselves. Except, in the footage, something stood behind their chairs. Something long. Grinning. The tape cut. And neither of them were ever found. Locals still say, never go to the Cinema House on a Friday. The projector always plays new victims. Story 8. The Dollmaker's Cabin. Somewhere in the Scottish Highlands, nestled between pine trees, sits a crumbling wooden cabin. It belonged to a man they called the Dollmaker. Nobody knows his real name, only that he vanished in the 1950s, leaving behind hundreds of handmade dolls, each with human hair. Urban explorers still visit, but they never touch the dolls, except for Lewis. Lewis was documenting haunted spots for his TikTok. He found the cabin on a Reddit thread and decided to make it viral. When he entered, the cabin reeked of damp and rot. Dolls lined the walls, shelves, even the ceiling. Each had different eyes. Not painted, real glass eyes. One doll, at the center, sat on a throne. It had a crown, and its face was pale, more human than the rest. Lewis laughed, picked it up, and said, "Say hello to King Creep." He uploaded the clip and drove off. That night, while reviewing footage, the video glitched. The doll's eyes moved. Then came a knock on his flat door. 3 soft knocks. No one there. He looked down and found a doll. Same crown. Same stitched lips. He threw it out the window. But the next morning, it was back on his kitchen counter, holding a note. "Now you're part of the collection." Lewis's account went dead a week later. His flat was empty. Only thing left was a chair in the middle of the room, and a new doll sitting on it. Story 9. The Mirror in the Attic. Ellie was hired to clean out an old Victorian home set to be demolished. It was untouched since the 60s. Dust layered like snow, furniture under sheets, cobwebs thicker than rope. Upstairs, in the attic, she found it. A mirror. Tall, arched, wrapped in cloth. On the cloth, someone had written in faded chalk, "Do not uncover. Faces lie. Curiosity 1. She pulled it off. Her reflection blinked a second too late. She leaned in closer. The reflection smiled, she didn't. Then the attic door slammed behind her. Locked. She screamed, banged, cried. No one heard her. The mirror shimmered. Her reflection walked away, out of the frame. Gone. Then, from the attic corner, someone whispered, "She's you now." When builders came 2 days later, they found the attic empty. But in the mirror, frozen behind the glass, Ellie was banging, silently screaming, hands pressed to the other side. The cloth was wrapped back around it, but the faintest face print still presses against it, begging to be let out. Story 10. The Last Patient. There's an old psychiatric hospital in Derbyshire that shut down in the late 80s. Official reason: asbestos. Unofficial reason: patients began vanishing, one by one. Only one nurse ever stayed until the last day, Nurse Holloway. She was never seen again. Years later, urban legend junkie Marcus decided to explore the ruins. Armed with a GoPro and torch, he live-streamed the whole thing. The hospital was a skeleton. Walls peeling, hospital beds rusted, vines creeping in through shattered windows. He made it to the patient rooms. Most were empty, except one. Room 217. It had restraints on the bed, deep scratches on the walls, and in the far corner, a chair facing the wall. Someone sat there, unmoving. Marcus, half convinced it was a prank prop, walked in. "This real enough for you, chat?" he laughed. He tapped the figure's shoulder. It stood up, but when it turned, its face was taped over. White gauze wrapped around the head, with a name tag pinned to the chest. It said, "Last patient discharged never." Marcus screamed, bolted, lost connection on stream. His phone was found days later in room 217, still recording. The footage showed Marcus running, breathing heavy, hiding in a supply closet. Whispers behind the door. "She discharged me." "You can't." Then silence. Then a whisper right into the mic. "Tag, you're the nurse now." No sign of Marcus. But room 217 now has 2 chairs. One facing the wall, one facing the door. Waiting. If you made it this far, you're either brave or cursed. Either way, hit like, drop a comment telling us which story got you the worst, and subscribe before they find you next.